The world has irrevocably changed, not with a sudden dramatic crash, but through a slow seismic shift in political influence, economic alliances, and technological advancements that have redefined the global balance of power. The post-World War II order, built on a certain understanding of power dynamics, is now giving way to a new reality. The 21st century has ushered in the rise of new influential nations, reshaping global trade and the flourishing of alternative development models. This transformation is particularly evident in regions like Africa, where certain countries' growing economic and strategic footprint has redrawn the geopolitical map. Africa serves as a microcosm of these broader global shifts. Nations such as China, India, and the Gulf states have become significant trading partners and creditors, demonstrating their increasing economic and strategic sway on the continent. These economic ties are often intertwined with larger strategic ambitions. Foreign direct investment flows into key sectors, transport, mining, energy, and infrastructure, frequently as part of a calculated strategy to integrate African economies into a wider sphere of influence. This manifests in the financing and construction of large-scale infrastructure projects, railways snaking across the landscape, ports bustling with activity, and highways connecting previously disparate regions. These projects facilitate trade and economic integration, simultaneously secure resource access, expand geopolitical leverage, and cement market dominance for investing nations. Similarly, investments in mining and energy empower African nations to exploit their natural resources, often with companies from these influential nations playing a central role in extraction and processing. However, this engagement is not without its critics. Many argue that this approach prioritizes resource extraction and fosters debt dependency. Indeed, some African countries are burdened by unsustainable debt levels, raising concerns about sovereignty and long-term economic stability. Yet, others contend that these investments have filled crucial gaps, especially where traditional funding sources have been hesitant to venture. This shift coincides with a recalibration of traditional aid structures. In some developed nations, we observe a move away from conventional development assistance, perhaps best exemplified by the gutting of agencies like USAID, giving room for emerging powers to step in with alternative models, such as China's infrastructure for resources approach. While this reduction in traditional aid could be a hardship for African nations accustomed to it, it points towards a larger truth. The future lies in trade, not simply aid. While aid can be vital in times of crisis or for specific development initiatives, sustainable long-term growth will be forged through economic partnerships and robust trade. This reality is reflected in the changing patterns of global commerce. Over the last 2 decades, trade between developing countries, South-South trade, has been on the ascent, while trade between developed nations, North-North trade, has been waning. This trend has only accelerated since the 2008 global financial crisis, which exposed the fragility of an overly centralized global economic system. Data underscores this point. South-South trade, once a smaller fraction of global commerce, has now surpassed North-North trade. According to UNCTAD, the share of South-South trade in global trade increased from 7.4% in 1990 to 15.4% in 2010. By 2021, South-South trade reached an estimated value of $5.3 trillion, surpassing North-North trade. This burgeoning South-South trade reflects a more interconnected and interdependent world. Nations are increasingly trading with each other, investing in each other's economies, and forging new alliances. This transformation is driven by several factors: the rapid economic expansion of emerging markets, the diversification of global supply chains, and the strategic desire of developing nations to lessen their reliance on traditional powers. Ambitious initiatives designed to create vast networks of trade and infrastructure spanning continents have also contributed to this shift. While these initiatives have been criticized for their lack of transparency and potential debt burdens, they have also injected much-needed investment into infrastructure and fostered greater economic connectivity. Conversely, the declining North-North trade has been partly due to the relative stagnation of advanced economies. The rise of protectionist sentiments in some nations has further exacerbated this trend. This decline also mirrors a shift in the broader global economic center of gravity. As emerging markets gain economic weight, they become less reliant on traditional markets for their growth, allowing them to cultivate more diverse trade relationships and exercise greater autonomy in their economic policies. These changes are not merely economic, they are profoundly geopolitical. The growing influence of certain nations and the increasing integration of the developing world are creating a multipolar world, one characterized by multiple centers of power. This shift is already testing the effectiveness of global institutions, such as the UN, World Bank, and IMF, which were originally designed to operate within a Western-dominated global order. This has deep implications for international relations, global governance, and the future of the established international order. In this evolving landscape, countries must reimagine their approach to global engagement. They must find ways to collaborate with emerging powers, adapt to the fluid dynamics of global trade, and address the concerns of newly emergent powers. This requires a more nuanced and collaborative foreign policy approach that acknowledges cooperation's necessity in tackling global challenges. The world will continue its transformation. The growing influence of certain countries, the reconfiguration of global trade, and the emergence of a multipolar world are reshaping the global order in ways that challenge long-held assumptions. The central question is not whether these changes can be halted, but rather how nations can adapt to them and carve out a new role in a world no longer dominated by a single power. The answer to this question will determine the shape of the global order for generations to come. In this shifting landscape, nations must not merely react but proactively craft strategies that ensure economic resilience, safeguard sovereignty, and foster diplomatic agility in an era where no single power dominates.